All right, guys. We've made it. It's time for the thrilling conclusion of Apologetics. Woo! Are you applauding because it's over? Or all right. So today we're talking about having the conversation. So we built up all our knowledge base. We've got why we think God exists. We've got why we think the Bible's right. We've got why we think Jesus is who Jesus says he is. We understand our theology. We understand what's not theology. And we understand some of the arguments that the other side has been making. So how do we take that all together and turn it into a conversation? Anybody, how many times have you guys done that before? It's fun, right? Those who've done it?
Just be like, dude, Jesus saves, that's it.
Wait,
Whatever you believe, you're wrong.
Well, see, if we were Calvinists, we could do that. Because it doesn't matter, right? I did my part. God's job's the rest, right?
Rash judgment,
All right.
hatred.
All right, so we are having the conversation. So today we're gonna break this down just a couple ways. This may be a little shorter. We'll see how it goes. Because again, we've got the Mandalorian premiering tonight, so we gotta get out.
I almost skipped like an hour of work today to watch it.
Listen, man, if they hadn't cut,
Sia kept me in check. She said, "We'll watch it later."
there may be a few sites filtered on the Ohio network because of me, but partially because of my attempts to watch some stuff preemptively. All right, anyway, totally not ethical. Anyway, so we're going to discuss the point of arguing and discussing, okay? A lot of people don't understand the point of it, and it shows. We're going to talk about how to influence people and not make friends. That's a perk, but... and then we're going to discuss some tactics, okay? So, the point of arguing. Anybody have any ideas?
It's fun.
It's fun. It can be, yeah.
There is no
There is no
point.
point sometimes. Some of the arguments I've heard, yeah.
Broaden your perspective.
To broaden your perspective. Ooh, okay. Look at you reading ahead in the textbook. No. So, I'm going to say that the point of arguing is not winning. No. So winning in apologetics, and ultimately evangelism, because that's the whole point, right, is not about winning a debate or an argument. So this is not a battle of rhetoric. It's not about, I win, you lose. It's about winning hearts, minds, and more importantly, souls, right? Okay, the point of arguing, from our perspective here tonight, is to be heard. Okay? If you aren't willing to speak in a way that your audience is willing to listen to, then you're talking to yourself. I feel that way sometimes. It's okay. Sometimes that's going to involve changing your language. So it's speaking in a way that doesn't necessarily take what you know to be the truth for granted. When I'm having these conversations with atheists, agnostics, and other various non-believers, one phrase I tend to use a lot is from the Christian perspective, because it phrases like that, they allow the people you're talking to feel less on guard. It's like, oh, it's point of view and a point of view. It's not, well, listen, I'm telling you that it's this. It's, well, the Christian perspective says this. That's just what this says. It's way less aggressive when you're doing that. It's easier to hear. One way to do that is to avoid the gotchas and zingers.
I used to love zingers, by the way.
The
Sorry.
coconut.
I prefer the gotcha.
That's fair. I'm a zinger guy in rhetoric myself. I love turning a phrase and just like letting it zip right by somebody. In my less sanctified days, a goal of mine used to be to insult people without them realizing I'm insulting them. It's a fun thing to do. Oh, that was bad. Anyway, so in a world of 30-second sound bites, and those are on the long side, TikTok, it's tempting to model your arguments after people like Ben Shapiro, or more aptly for our purposes, people like Ray Comfort, people who have made a career out of poning some noobs, if you want to talk in the vernacular of the gamer. I think I may have aged myself at that point, but it's okay. Early internet, for those who may not know.
You've aged us even more because I have no idea what you're talking about.
Poning is a typo of the word owning, but they put a P instead of an O because they're right next to each other. And noobs is new people, so new players usually. Owning some noobs. The point is not to argue in a way that wins the argument in as short, as few moves as possible. Okay, we're playing 3D chess, not regular 2D chess. So, for the sake of winning the conversation and appearing intellectually superior to the opponent, okay, that's not what we're trying to do. It's tempting, especially in today's society and in the way that we see things happen. All things considered, we want to remember the end goal, which is
Winning Christ.
winning souls. Yes, winning souls. All right. Okay, we're not here to win arguments. Okay, I'm hitting on that today. Okay, we're not winning arguments. We're here to win souls. Don't get so caught up in the argument that you lose sight of the humanity of the person that you're arguing with. Okay.
So it's more you want to have, like, I hate the word even throwing argument out there.
Right.
Because then there's
From a
two
technical
meanings.
term, yes, but the connotation in today's vernacular, yeah, it sounds aggressive.
Conversation.
Yeah, a disagreeing conversation. Yeah, we're having a conversation from 2 different points. So I'm going to show a video here, just real quick. This is from the MTV Music Awards, I think it is. Yeah, you didn't think I'd be showing this, right? And it's Chris Pratt. Have any of you guys seen his generation speech before? His generation
Get
award?
all the pee out. Is it the top 9?
Yes, it's top 9,
I
yes.
love this one.
Okay, so some of you have seen this. I think I turned everything
He
off.
was
Let's
way
go.
too excited.
So for those who are watching this after the fact, that part's all going to be cut out because of copyright. But the link's going to be in the bottom. So that was Chris Pratt accepting the Generation Award at MTV back in 2018. And that is a man who knows his audience. Okay. Has anybody else ever thought to mix poop jokes and the gospel together?
I
Maybe ought to care.
I'm sorry. So
That side of the room doesn't surprise me that much. That's okay. Some of my days as a team leader, I probably went pretty close to.
It's a requirement when learning how to be a youth leader.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of
even
those
on
things.
Sunday, I said, hey, some of you have your routines, right? You go in the bathroom. Oh,
This is
okay,
true.
let's not say
This is true. But yeah, so the point being, outside of just sheer entertainment, the reason I showed this was because this guy knew his audience. He knew the language of his audience. He knew the culture of his audience. And he presented it. And that man gave the gospel to millions of people who were listening to him, cheering for him. Wasn't sure about Aubrey Plaza. Her face is kind of hard sometimes. It's just kind of stuck that way. So she's a hard read.
It's the plastic.
Yeah, Pregnant Dallas was very, very nice though. So, yeah. So take that not necessarily as a template, but as some encouragement on some of the ways that you can present.
Just real quick, can
Yeah.
I say this? He's not the first guy to say that.
No,
Well,
there's been a few over the years.
but
Yeah.
the very first one that I know of is Paul in the Bible.
Oh, yes,
Because
yes.
he's talking about. No, I can't find it. I
Just search the keyword, buddy. Come on.
In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, I have become all things to all men so that by all possible
Yes.
means I might save some.
Yes.
So he knew his audience too, is my point.
Yes, it's biblical. Poop jokes in the gospel are
Yes.
biblical, okay? If it's the right audience. Know your people. All right. So, I mentioned something. That man knows how to influence people. And part of how we do that, and we're going to discuss that today. Now, this bit actually came from a training that I took at work. And I kind of twisted it. This was designed for, it's called crisis intervention. And so this is when crisis looks like anything to different people, right? We discussed that a little bit in your mental health class, series we did, Tom. So this was designed, I tried to tweak it enough that it kind of suited our purpose a little bit well, but the point was in there. So as we're we're influencing people, we're going to discuss the way influences the way we communicate. Yeah, that came out weird. Sorry. We're going to talk about some communication barriers between people. There's actual hierarchy, steps to how you change someone's mind and behavior. And then we're going to discuss some of the active listening techniques that come up from that. So, things that are influences on the way we communicate. Can you guys think of any before I start listing off my list?
Bias.
Tone, yeah.
Medium, so like how we're communicating.
Yeah, how we're communicating, yeah, that's true. Yeah, you got to remember, you can have a completely different conversation. You can say the same words in text that you are in person, right? And be taken completely different. Any other ideas before I start? All right. So something to consider. Culture. And that's not just American, right? Our culture here in suburbia, Midwest, Rust Belt is going to be way different in a lot of ways than folks from the South, right? Or folks from the inner city, or folks from Europe, or folks from the Southwest, or folks from the Northwest, or the West Coast, or the far East Coast, okay? The culture, understanding those differences, okay? You referenced Paul talking, that's something there. Paul on Mars Hill, we referenced that in the first class that we took, right? Where he's talking to these Greek philosophers, and they're like, and he's sitting there quoting Greek to them, like their culture, and twisting it into Jesus. Okay, he took that understanding. Religion, duh, right? The whole point of this class is talking to people of other religions. You can go down in some rabbit holes with other Christians. That's fun too. Different type of conversation, though. Understanding. That's why we did that comparative religion class session that we did. It was part of this is going to be understanding, because we're not preaching to other Christians. Ideally, we're preaching to people who don't necessarily understand us. They don't understand our viewpoints, our perspectives, our understanding of the universe. Even if they think they do. So, and the easiest way to do that is to understand them. So if you have to understand your audience, remember? Gender can be a thing, especially these days. The four of us were sitting in the office talking, and I think that conversation took a completely different route if it were mixed company or all women, right? Not that it was anything bad, but it was dudes talking. That's how we communicate. So that's something to keep in mind too. Where we're from kind of goes back to the culture. We touched on that a little bit. What we've been taught. So even generational drift, or different schools, different colleges, different whatever, different parents or lack of parents. We learn things that make us who we are. And personalities. Okay. I have a strong personality. I know that. I come off in a way to a lot of people that really annoys some folks, really insults some folks, and I've been working on that. I was so proud of myself. I had some bite marks on my tongue the other day. But yeah.
Sorry.
No, it wasn't you that time. Forgot to bite my tongue there. Our personal beliefs as well. So I think every single person in this room views something differently, even though we all claim, just on Christianity alone, even though we all claim the same faith, the same ideas, we have different ideas and beliefs on those things. It is hot. It's okay. I'm feeling it up here too. It's warm, and it's not just me.
Actually, Jake, what I was thinking is like, it's hard. Maybe humility is the word, but
Yeah.
we all, no matter what, whether we want to admit it or not,
Mhm.
we're going to approach a conversation like this with a bias.
Oh yeah.
And that ranges from all these things, culture.
Well, and-
gender, like, we just have to know that's there.
Mm-hmm.
And are we willing to let some of that be modified, or are we set with this is?
Bias is tricky these days because it comes in a couple different flavors and how you approach it. For people who take a healthy understanding of bias, they consider their own biases and consider the biases of other people, use that to weigh things, right? You get people who try to pretend they don't have a bias. And that kind of skews them sometimes, and their ability to listen, especially. And then you have people who believe everybody else has biases. And those two kind of go together a little bit. But that any kind of bias whatsoever completely negates what you have to say, especially if that bias disagrees with their own bias. So that's a really good point. And how we're feeling. There have been days, hangry. Hangry's a thing. Tired. Frustrated, cold. I mean, just all these sore. Or just a little extra slap happy, who knows? The way that you feel at any given moment is going to tweak how you're having this discussion. Again, it could be the same two people, same conversation otherwise. Two separate days where the variables are completely different. So that can be hard sometimes. Two separate sets of hormones going. That goes back to the gender thing. Again, biting the tongue. I need to start doing that. So some barriers in communication. So those are the things that influence us as we communicate. Some barriers as we're trying to work with people, especially in this conversation, ordering and commanding. Like I said, this came from work for me, where there's a lot of ordering and commanding going on. But I think in our conversation it works too, because way too often we see a lot of folks who they come to this conversation on both sides and start trying to tell people what's what. You ain't going to listen. God tried that at the beginning. It still didn't work. We had everything we wanted. And no. Along those same lines, threatening. Threatening, I think, kind of falls into guilt trips too. So that's an easy way to go. Things people recognize those, especially if you use them a lot. Making sure my kid's okay. We're okay so far. Yeah. It's keeping. That guilt, those threats of, because it could be fine. It's you don't want to play with me. It's you just don't care about me. That's a threat, right? It's a passive one, but it's a threat. It's ironically enough, preaching. Okay, some of us get going sometimes because we know, right? We know the truth, and we need you to know that truth. And preaching is what? How many people are talking when you're preaching?
Monologue.
It is a monologue. You don't want that, because we're having what? Discussions, dialogues. Dia means two. Okay, two speaking, literally. Somewhat related, not arguing or lecturing. Okay. Remember, what we use the word argument in the more positive sense initially as a discussion. This is more in that negative connotation. Okay. When you start getting this conversation turning more into an aggressive argument, that's when you know you need to back off. Because now you've become the bad guy. And you are not going to be heard. And that's the goal, right? At least immediately. Judging, blaming, or criticizing. That's easy in our cultures too, on both sides these days. It used to be a thing that was against us more than anything else. So I think we're a little extra sensitive to it, or should be. But the other side gets into that too. And as I'm listing these things, I think it's important to realize it's not only for you not to do, but for you to be aware of so you can call it out in the other person. Because a lot of times people don't want to do these things. There's one more, sorry. Name calling or shaming. Was it that ad hominem we talked about the first week? You guys remember what that is? It's one of the big no-nos when you're having logical discussions. Ad hominem literally means against the man or at the man. So it's insulting people rather than making an argument against their arguments. So we don't want to do that. So, the steps to changing someone's mind. Now, these last 3 slides are usually an entire day's worth of lecture in the class that I stole it from. So these, I'm giving you the 30-second version. That's really been a lot of this class the whole way through. This is the 30-second version of stuff that could be long times. So, the first step to changing someone's mind. Hypnosis. No, no, that would be a slide. Inclined plane. So the first step is active listening. All right. Active listening is a way of listening and responding to another person's that improves mutual understanding.
What was that? Sorry.
That is part of active listening, though.
Repeat it,
Yeah, that's okay. The next thing is empathy. What's empathy?
Understanding how somebody else feels.
Yeah, you're understanding. So empathy is officially the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. Not to be confused with sympathy. What's the difference? You guys know?
Feeling bad for somebody versus
Right. So empathy is understanding. Sympathy is actually feeling the same. I go back to my Star Trek on my nerd side. In Next Generation, you've got Counselor Troy, who's an empath. Like that's a little telepathic thing that she can sense what other people are feeling, and she uses that. So she describes, she knows, she understands what's going on, and she uses that and tells the captain, and he's able to make judgments accordingly. The way, when I've taught similar things to this, the way I've described the difference is empathy is, I get you. Sympathy is, I got you.
Say it again.
So empathy is, I get you. Sympathy is, I got you.
Okay.
So I get you. I understand you. Yeah.
Need to rehear it.
So, all right. So you've been listening. You've been having this conversation. You understand what they're going through, what their feelings are on something. The next step is to build rapport. So what's rapport? Credibility. Yeah, that's a good word. Any others before I go into the dictionary? Huh? Relationship. Yeah. So rapport. Yes, it's French. A close and harmonious relationship in which the people or groups concerned understand each other's feelings or ideas and communicate well. I summed that up into I know you and I trust you. You've taken that I get you, and it's now mutual. We get each other. At that point, you start getting influence in their life. Okay. The culmination of these previous steps is that your relationship with this person has granted you influence. Okay. They trust you, and they trust the way that you think. At which point you can start to change their opinion. So
That's good too, because that's not just one time, like, I mean, I know, there are people that don't believe like us that one time we have these conversations, but I think absolutely in order to get to that top level, you have to build that relationship.
this takes time.
For sure.
To do this right, it takes long-term relationships to really get some. Now you can, like we talked about in the first week, throw some pebbles in people's shoes, right? Give that little annoying thing for them to think about. That's a good long-term plan, but it's not, you can have that in one-off conversation, but you're not going to reach all the way up in just a 15-minute conversation, half hour, whatever it may be. It's going to take time for that to happen.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of if you can do it in a different order. And I don't think you can unless you.
It's hard. because each one builds on each other. That active listening, like I said, because that's a hard one for a lot of people to really get. And that's the key. That is the foundation. We're going to go over some tricks for that and some techniques to use if that's something you need to work on here in just a second. But yeah, that's a really good observation, J.O. You can't go out of order here. You can't have rapport with somebody if you don't understand them. You can't change somebody's opinion if they don't think that you're worth listening to and worth having influence on their life. Okay? Now, some of these people may be a little more shallow than others. Chris Pratt, I don't know Chris Pratt. But a lot of people think he's important. And he spoke in a way that made me giggle and swoon a little bit. And now
He changed
Right.
your opinion about it.
And now, you know what? I might change how I poop at parties.
I'm not gonna hold it in anymore.
Right. Let it out. The P first.
Say in the scope of, little teaser for Sunday, but in the scope of like relational living, if I have friendships with people that differ from me, there probably are moments, life events, etc., where I can really be empathetic,
Yeah.
which shifts the order. I mean, I guess if you're looking at like a classic debate,
Sort of, yeah.
but I think there's parts where in relationship with somebody that believes different, I can maybe pluck some of those things situationally, not in the form of like, I'm about to spew the gospel on you, but
Right.
just living life together where it would trickle.
Yeah, sometimes just being around people is going to start getting those first couple of steps together. I mean, you don't have to necessarily try sometimes. Again, now where I took this training, I'm walking in on somebody who's in a cell, covered in who knows what, threatening to do who knows what, to himself or others, and so you're trying to do this quick, and so that is one of those things. And for me, I think I've mentioned to most of you guys, in the prison for a while, I worked in the mental health ward, and I dealt with this a lot. And so talking guys out of some really serious issues, and a lot of that time, because I had spent so much time with them, talking and understanding them, that active listening, that empathy, I could jump straight to that rapport step. And it's like, hey man, you know me, right? Like, when have I done you wrong? And so then you can say, then once they get that realization, it's like, yeah, maybe I should listen to this guy because he hasn't done me wrong. Oh, influence, right? There it is. All right. So just a couple of tips and tricks for active listening, okay? Minimize interruptions, okay? That's a big thing. By doing this, the other person feels that what they are saying is important and that they are being heard. That goes both ways, right? If our goal is to be heard, that's kind of their goal too, whether they want to admit it or not. Paraphrasing. So an active, it's basically what we know it to be, but an active listening. So it's repeating back in your own words the meaning of what they said to you to show that you're listening to understand, right?
So what I'm hearing you say is,
Yes. Reflecting or mirroring, obviously synonyms. So this is repeating the last words or main ideas of a subject's message. The message, yes. That's how I talk sports, by the way, if you guys haven't caught on. I don't really follow sports all that much.
That is fantastic.
So when I'm hanging out with some guys talking sports, it's like, yeah, LeBron did do that, didn't he? Man, Haslam, yeah, crazy.
Secret.
It's okay. It's not that secret. If you pay attention, yeah. It's, yeah, that's my secret to talking sports. Make me feel manly for once. No. Open-ended questions. These are great. Do you ask open-ended questions?
I'm not really.
So yeah. So open-ended questions are questions that can't simply be answered by yes, no, or I don't know.
An open-ended question in your joke there would be, what's your favorite open-ended question?
There you go, right?
That requires a not yes or no answer.
I don't have that in here, but that's called parroting, by the way. That's one that we do as well. Minimal encouragers. You guys have been really good about this today. Minimal encouragers, just little body language, that like the head nods. Yeah. Every preacher loves those, right? Like,
Come on.
Amen, brother. Preach.
Try not to sound like Josh.
so silence and effective pauses. Yeah. I'm not good at those. I got to work on them. So creating this space or avoiding a conversation, it does two things. The first thing is it gives that person the opportunity to respond back. You know, there's two types of people who in conversations: the people who respond at the end of the sentence, and the people who already have their response planned by the end of the sentence. I'm B. Actually, type A, but yeah, that's.
Where's body language?
Body language is in the minimal encouragers probably more than anything else. But yeah, that's an important thing too.
I could almost argue that could be by itself.
It really
Encouragers,
could. It
right?
really could.
But if I'm
And actually, that was a completely separate slide in the presentation I stole this from. And so yeah, but I probably could have brought this in here as well. Yeah, how you present yourself. Are you just kind of like this, or you're just like looking off, or you picking your nose, whatever. Tom over there with his hat on his face, leaning backwards. I'm so glad you're paying attention.
I'll just give an example.
But no, that's great. Yeah, and that's good too. It's being aware of how you're presenting yourself.
Being aware. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and awareness. I know. Now, I sometimes go over the top on body language. I'm very Italian.
Do you have that for real?
What's that?
Are you actually Italian?
Very much. Yeah. Before I was bald, I had very thick black hair. Now I look more of my Scottish roots with the red beard. But yeah, I had really thick black hair before most of you guys knew me, and yeah, it's very Italian. And so I talk with my hands a lot, as I'm sure you've all noticed over the last 8 weeks. I had a girlfriend in high school who would steal my silverware from me at restaurants because I almost stabbed her too many times. Because I'd be sitting there like, yeah. Yeah, it's a thing. I'm knocking over drinks. It's horrible. And then finally summarizing. We're going to summarize it. No. It's just periodically throughout the conversation, just kind of summarizing what has been said, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. And again, it goes back to people are feeling heard. Everybody's on the same page. Okay, so for the last section, we're going to talk tactics. And that isn't just me using some fun words. It actually comes from a book called Tactics by Greg Kokel. If you guys haven't read it, his stuff's great. I'll put, he's got a couple playlists of him actually teaching through some of this stuff, way more in depth than I am here. And I'll put some of those up on the page too, so you guys can see some of his work. But yeah, if you can get this book at any time, it's definitely worth it. It's like $20, I think, tops. This is the second edition. If you get the second edition, get that, because he adds a lot more to it. So tactics. So tactics involve your approach. We're going to talk about that. It's going to go back to that long-term thing that we were talking about with the steps to influencing people. He uses what's called the Columbo tactic. That's kind of his basic one. Do you know who Columbo is, Mary? You look confused.
I just am intrigued by the name.
Okay.
Okay, that's intriguing.
So about half of us in here are old enough to really know Columbo, and the other half have maybe seen reruns. I get it. I'm in the second half.
My parents used to watch
Mm-hmm.
it. I don't.
Yeah.
So I feel
That's okay.
Yeah, sorry.
The suicide tactic, which is far less morbid than it sounds, and the steamroller tactic, which is the only really offensive tactic we got here today. So your approach. Kokel calls it the gardeners versus the harvesters. If you know your scripture, it's sowing and reaping, right? Okay. So the gardeners are people who prepare the soil, plant the seeds, fertilize, water, weed. That's what we're talking about today more than anything else. Okay. This is the long-term stuff. You are doing the prep work. You are making all of the hard work in here to get to the point where things can be harvested. And if you guys, do we have any gardeners in the room? Like people who like to garden? Okay, so like I get my tomatoes, man. I love my tomatoes. You know a tomato is ready when you just look at it the wrong way and it falls into your hand. Okay, just the little shift of air from you coming up underneath it, it's off. That's when something's ripe. Okay, so the harvesters are the people who, after the gardeners have done all the hard work, come in and just pick it. So when most people think of gospel presentations, evangelism, they think of the harvesters. So those are the kneeling at the altar, the leading the people, who are saying the prayer and all that stuff, which is an important part of this. You need to have that sales pitch, that close at the end. That's why I never did great at sales. I'm a gardener. When I used to do sales, I called myself a consultative salesman. Because I was the guy, you could come to me and I would teach you all about what you needed to know and show you all of the stuff so that you could make the decision you needed. But man, I couldn't close a sale. My managers got so frustrated with me. It's like, hey, you're 90% there. I'm like, Greg Kokel, man. Greg Kokel. So yeah, these two things are both equally important in this. And they can be the same person. But understand what part of the gardening and harvesting you're in currently at the time. Again, most of what we're talking about through this whole series has been the gardening side, according to Kokel. And just a little scripture on this part. From Matthew 25, you reap where you did not sow, you gather where you did not scatter. It sounds kind of bad, right, when you think about it in our context, but looking at it in this gardener and harvester thing, it's not. It's just, this is the way of things. Okay. What was it? I think it was the beginning of, this is the way. Mandalorian, a couple more minutes. So close.
I thought
I have spoken.
So what was it? In The Chosen, I think the beginning of season 2, if you guys watch that, where they're hanging out in Samaria, and is it James and John get sent up the hill to till all the dirt? They're like, man, we're not even going to be here. Why are we doing this? So yeah, there was a lesson in that, right? Another one is in John 4. So even now, the one who reaps draws a wage and harvests a crop for eternal life, so that the sower and the reaper may be glad together. Oh, it's teamwork. Thus the saying, one sows and another reaps, is true. I sent you to reap what you have not worked for. Others have done the hard work, and you have reaped the benefits of their labor. Again, in our capitalistic society, that sounds like a dig. But from an eternal standpoint, it's no, man, we're getting it done. You did your part, you did your part. And it's done. Souls are saved. All right. So getting into the fun part, the Columbo tactic. All right. So this, the Columbo tactic is named after Lieutenant Columbo. Peter Faulkner, if you guys know. If you don't know Columbo, Princess Bride, he's the grandfather, right? Does that help you a little bit? Still nothing? Okay. Oh my God. Tom, feed her some yogurt. She needs some culture, okay? All right. So Columbo's style was he would come into the room and he would just start he'd play dumb, right? That was his thing. And so he would come in and was like, I don't get it, man. You got to explain this more to me. And then, literally his last line before he solves the mystery is, there's just one thing I don't understand. And then he just rolls it all out and they arrest the guy and whatever. It's not Law and Order. They just stop at the arrest.
Like the first generation psych.
Kind of, yeah, okay. Yeah, if you know psych, yeah, it's kind of, yeah, it's all right. Feel better, okay. Yeah, because that's what he did, except he pretended. Yeah. Okay, so this is mimicking that style, and one day he may need to rename this because just people aren't going to understand at all without a much longer explanation. Are you showing her pictures of Peter Faulkner?
Yes.
Okay.
He was writing down something you said.
Oh, okay. All right. So Kokel describes this tactic as striving to play offensively in an inoffensive way. So you're guiding the conversation, you're taking control of the conversation, you're being an active participant, leading these things, playing offensively, but you're doing it in a way that doesn't seem too pushy. So the first stage of this, again, is gathering information. During this stage, you're asking questions to get to know the person, what their opinions are on the topic on hand. It allows you to gain insight into their story and their opinions, okay? And helps you tailor your approach to what their specific needs are. And so as you're asking these questions, the number one follow-up question that, like just the template that he uses is, what do you mean by that? So as you're talking, let's see, he gives some examples. Did I write anything? Yeah. So like, it says there is no truth. What do you mean by that? Because if you start going in there the way that I think of, it's like, there's no truth, you're stupid. Obviously that's a truth claim. And we're going to talk about that in a minute too. But maybe they're defining something a little differently. A couple years back, a former friend of mine, unfortunately, we haven't talked in many years, but we worked together for a long time. And she was a very ardent atheist, lived a lifestyle which wasn't, mean or anything, but it was definitely not Christian. She was into polyamory and all this New Age stuff, and it was, but we were friendly. I think I sent her a Facebook request, and before she responded to it, she sent me a warning back. Like, hey, I don't, I'm cool with accepting that request, but just know that I know this is not going to be okay with your life, with your beliefs of the world. I'm like, it's cool. I know that about you. What I didn't know about her, and I didn't find out until well into our friendship, where we actually had some of these conversations, was that she was not always an atheist. In her teens and early 20s, she was a very ardent Christian. But her Christianity at the time was based on a very emotional experience. And I remember she told me the thing that really kind of ticked off her move away from Christianity was, she would go to these services and these revivals and encounters and stuff and get this emotional high from them. And that's what she equated with Christianity. And then she's like, and then one time I went to a concert and I got that same high. And I'm just like, wait a minute. And so how do you think that helped me communicate with her? At least at the time. So stage 2, keeping the burden of proof where it belongs. So what is the burden of proof? You guys know what that is? The burden of proof is where you have to back up your claims. So if you make a claim, you have to provide the reason for it and the evidence for it. A lot of times in these conversations, and again, we're just as guilty sometimes, it's the person makes the claim and then tries to get you, or we will jump in as well, tries to get you to defend your stance against their claim rather than them trying to defend their claim themselves. Or we'll jump in and say, no, you're wrong because. Well, we don't have to prove them wrong first. They have to prove themselves right. And vice versa. That's part of why we talked about stuff we did earlier in this course.
Can you give an example of what that would look like?
Sure. So,
Put you on the spot.
no, it's okay. So like I said, sometimes for us it's like, hey, God doesn't exist, just to go on a grand scheme thing. And we'll start going into these, all these spiels about why we think God exists, where that's not where you start. It may come to that point where you have the counterpoints, but the first thing that needs to happen is they need to explain why they believe that.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, you can make all the claims you want. I can claim that the sky is green. Are you going to start arguing with me? Are you going to start? You should not start by saying that, no, you're wrong, it's blue. You should start by using Kokel's question, how'd you get to that conclusion? So,
And maybe not say it sarcastically.
Oh yeah. This is you're not trying to be offensive. Yeah, it's playing the offensive in an inoffensive way. This is kind conversation here. We'll get mean a little later because sometimes you have to do that. That'll be tactic 3 in here. And then stage 3 is shoot for targets. Okay, so the first 2 are really, you're not doing a whole lot. You're asking questions back, right? You're just trying to lay the land and get on the same page, get those definitions in line. Part 3 is where it takes a little skill. Yeah. Or are you just doing a range of motion? Okay. I couldn't tell if you're going for the question with your bad arm or just flexing as it's healing. Yeah. He's in the sling. I'm not being mean. Okay.
Those online.
Right. Got to clarify these things for those not in the room in the context, which is a great active listening part. Yeah. What do I mean by that? So in shooting for the targets, you're going to do 2 things. Okay. This takes a little more skill and knowledge beyond just trying to figure out what they think. So you want to ask questions that advance your point of view. So as you're working through these things, it's getting into these questions that start talking about, hey, guiding questions, so to speak, where it's you want to guide the conversation in this area, so you want to get them to start thinking about these things ahead of time and start getting them to acknowledge certain things. Because if you get them to not start acknowledging things, then it's really hard for them to backpedal on those. Coco used a great story about how he was talking to a woman about abortion, and the woman was like, "Hey, I'm pro-life personally, but I don't think it's right to tell other people that they shouldn't do that." And he goes, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And she goes, "Well, I personally think it's wrong to take a human life as a baby, and so now you've established that they think that that's a human life. So, well, what makes it right?" And you can see how you can start asking those questions, which is part 2, questions to point out issues with their position. So as you start kind of hashing these things out and getting things more finely defined, you take, well, what do you mean by that? Well, now I know what you mean by that. And you need to explain it a little further because this is the issue I'm seeing. This is that point-counterpoint part of the conversation. Yeah?
So my only question about this is, in a culture right now that's very, well, that's your truth, and this is my truth, and like that, it's just very much
relativism.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess, does this still work?
So what you're saying is there is no absolute truth.
I'm not saying that.
Well, that's what the argument would be, right? There is no absolute truth. Convenient. Thank you for that wonderful segue. That falls into suicides.
Oh, good. I'm so glad I could assist.
That was great. Thank you.
Don't come back.
So suicides deal with self-defeating arguments. Okay? A self-defeating argument is an argument that makes a claim, and then later on in that argument works against that claim. So there is no absolute truth is what?
An absolute truth.
A truth claim.
Yes.
So some lesser examples. I can't speak a word of English. I'm claiming I can't speak English, and I'm saying it in English, right? You can't know anything for sure, kind of that same concept. I wouldn't exaggerate in a million years. Yeah. There is no absolute truth. I had that one in here. It's wrong to make moral judgments, which is what? A moral judgment. It's wrong. So, all right. So these are things, again, the first thing you need to do is identify that basic claim. So they're claiming it's wrong to make a moral judgment. Does it apply back to itself? Well, yeah, you're making a moral judgment about it saying that it's wrong to make a moral judgment. So it in turn defeats itself. Now these gets into some wordplay sometimes, and you got to be on your toes. You get examples like, it's my brother said he's an only sibling. There's an only child, right? It doesn't work that way. Speaking of siblings, there's a part of this that Coco calls sibling rivalry. These are two separate but related statements where one defeats the other. An example of that is statement 1, there are no moral absolutes. Statement 2, if God exists, then why is there so much evil in the world? Why would those be mutually defeating?
You kind of are making morals when you say God and evil.
Well, for evil to exist, there has to be moral absolutes. So if you're recognizing that there's evil, then you're recognizing there's moral absolutes. So again, this one gets a little tricky sometimes. You got to be on your toes. You got to work on some of these thinking, these higher levels of philosophy and argument and stuff. Yeah. So finally, the steamroller tactic. You guys ever dealt with a steamroller before? So a steamroller, they are somebody who's abrasive, very strong personality, and even stronger opinions. Do we have any in the room? Maybe? You don't have to raise your hand. It's okay. I see that hand. The goal of a steamroller is to overpower the conversation with noise and interruptions. So the big thing about a steamroller is they use the phrase, yeah, but what about? A steamroller wants to take over a conversation because for them it's easier to do that by interrupting than it is to actually listen, wait for your response to the question that they asked to begin with, and give a thought-out, considerate counter response to them. So it's, on the Columbo side, we're asking questions left and right? But we're doing it in a thoughtful way, where we're guiding the conversation, but we're basing it off of what the people are saying. This one is taking control of the conversation aggressively by not allowing somebody to even finish a statement before they start trying to take you off on another rabbit trail. Now, generally, this is a bad thing, okay? There is what Coco calls a benevolent steamroller, which is, and I've dealt with this a lot of teens, where they are just super enthusiastic about something. And they come up with this thought halfway through what you're saying because it just inspired something and they want to know the next thing. So, yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing sometimes, but generally they're not pleasant people to have conversations with. So he gives us three steps, progressive steps, in dealing with steamrollers. The first is to stop them. Okay, right? Graciously but firmly ask them to stop interrupting you. Okay, you want to be kind. Kind of treat it maybe like a little bit of a negotiation. I do this with my kids all the time. Example of that would be, I wasn't done with my answer yet. But when I finish, I'll let you respond. Okay, or great point, but let me finish what I was saying. Then we take a look at your idea next, right? So a point of this is, you're asking for their permission at this point. It's to kind of politely redirect them initially. With the benevolent steamrollers, they'll usually get the point. Oh yeah, my bad. I'm sorry. With the more malicious ones, it doesn't always work, but you got to start somewhere, right? I'll give the benefit of the doubt. If they don't stop, you move to shame. I know we said that was a bad thing earlier, but this is tactics. Okay, we're moving into this intentionally for a reason. Okay, so at this point, you're going to directly respond and address to their impolite behavior. You want to call it out. So the first stage, you're best played politely. This one can get a little more aggressive as need be. This one can maybe be a couple of points in a row, gradually getting a little meaner. For example, hey, you asked the question, I'm trying to answer it. Do you want an answer or not? Right. Okay. Finally, if none of that works, leave them. They're not willing to play by the rules. They're not willing to respect you and make reasonable efforts to control themselves. They want to take full power and control of that conversation. So you know how you respond? You take full power and control and end the conversation. Now, if you want to be nice and kind of leave the door open for future, you can maybe hear out their last and final point and just say, that's great, but I'm done. You're obviously not playing. It's take your ball and leave, kind of thing. Yeah, this is a last ditch at this point. They have no interest in actually having a conversation with you. Really, These people, if you get to this point where you're trying to correct them and they refuse to just be polite and respect you, they're not there for a conversation. They're there to be the Ben Shapiro's that we talked about earlier. And again, I love a lot of Ben Shapiro's points, but you shouldn't model your conversation and dialogues after him. He wants to sit there and say, I'm better than you. Not he, the other person you're talking to at this point of the conversation. I'm more smart. I'm smarter. I'm more smart. I am more intelligent than you are. I am superior to you. You know nothing. I am gracing you with my thoughts. So why aren't you listening to me? That's where they're at this point usually. And peace out, right? So yeah, hopefully you don't get to that point, but often you do. I recently had a guy, another atheist friend that I used to work with, who came from a Christian background. He grew up there. He was a youth group kid, man. He was all about it, and moved into less so areas. And he and I kept a casual friendship for a while, and then he took some political things and started attributing my belief system to some political things that he disagreed with. And I left the channels of communication open, and then I think, what was it, after the Supreme Court with the whole abortion thing last summer, he just got really mean and nasty, just sending me these texts out of nowhere, unprovoked. I screenshotted one of them because I'm going to use it for conversation at some point for some stuff, but I had to block him at that point. I was like, no, we're not doing it. I'm ending the conversation now because you're not interested in actually talking to me. You're just throwing rhetoric out. So, and that's the course. So, I don't want that. Do you guys have any questions from anything that we've gone over in the last 8 weeks or today in general that you'd like to see clarified? I taught that well.
Any questions on, like specifics, like people that you're dealing with, or any questions like that?
Yeah, that's another. You got any real world situations that either you've dealt with or are dealing with, and maybe want to throw it out there. That's fine too. Anything online? Anybody got pulled up?
I think,
Sorry, I'll look.
Okay.
No, he said anybody else.
Yeah, anybody on the Zoom chat too, if they want to have anything they want to throw out there. And I'm not against doing little mini sessions in the future if something comes up or if somebody wants to learn more about something else. I'm cool with that too. But yeah.
I have just a quick comment.
Mm-hmm.
It is a lot.
It is. There was a lot. Yeah.
But, I have probably more than one, but one, I won't call it any names, but
Sure.
a specific person in my life that is the steamroller this way. So I really appreciate that because I get into these situations and I've had to walk away and then some time will go by.
And that's hard, especially when it's.
Open the door again, but like take over the over talk.
And that's a hard balance to find.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah, when it's people who are very close to you that you care deeply about, in your immediate family even sometimes, this can be hard. Hard balances, hard ways to approach it. I've had that plenty in my life as well, and you got to find what works and just trust in God. We've made fun of Calvinists a lot during this, but there's one thing I really, really do appreciate about Calvinism is that they don't have to worry because they do, if to a fault, give God credit for everything, and they just trust God to take care of things beyond anything else. And I really do appreciate about that belief system. And there's some peace to be found in that. I'll give them that. Anything else? Yeah.
I think to kind of go along with that is I love the step ladder thing. I think long term that's awesome, but also having to remember not to underestimate the role of the Holy Spirit in
Oh,
people's
yeah.
lives also, because I'm looking at I ideas and okay, with this person I've got this and whatever, but like if the Holy Spirit intervenes, we can go from 0 to hallelujah, they've accepted Christ and converted in no time flat. And so
It's not our job to convert people.
Amen.
We are guides. We are, as 2 Corinthians, I think it is, says, we're ambassadors for Christ, okay? More than anything else, people should see Christ in us and how we're acting and behaving with him. Now, some of what we talked about is important from hey, sometimes in that guiding, God's going to use us
yes. Yep.
to give them these ideas in ways and to provide that iron to sharpen back on them. And to blow against, so that they have that opportunity to be exposed to these ideas.
Yeah, I think in our current culture, the worst thing we can do as Christians is like react. And I think people want to intentionally try to trigger us. And by reacting maybe in a steamroller sense, we immediately confirm their bias towards what they think a Christian is.
Yeah, these things that we talked about, especially today, apply just as much to us and for us to be aware of as we're having these conversations as it does for us to apply to them, the others. We're all people. We all lean towards these things.
I had a teenager from Stromsville who wanted to interview me.
Okay.
Asked to film it.
Ooh.
I quickly realized that he was going after it.
Oh, yeah.
And he tried to get me to react to homosexuality, and I didn't. I was just like, I can share my view on that. It's like, but you also don't see Christians talking about gluttony, talking about other sins. Like we just exploit what the culture is going after, and it totally diffused them. And after we were done, he actually looked at me and he goes, you are probably one of the most respected pastors I've ever sat down with. That
And now I can't use any of this film.
Because I didn't react and was practical about
Yeah.
the conversation.
It's
It was like that
reasonableness.
spirit thing. Like he walked away like this guy's actually has credibility as a spiritual leader. That he was trying to nail me to the wall.
Right. A big part, if you look at the classical rhetorical formula, it's make your point, make your point, make your point, and then before you make your conclusion, you make some concessions. So it's like, I believe this because this, and this. Now, yeah, I understand on this side, there's some important things that, like you said, we don't address this, we don't address this. When we were talking last week about the hypocrisy within Christianity, we responded to that one video. Yeah, you're right. You're right. That's part of why we need it, but you're right. And that's something that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, I just think we tease it for something too. I just think we need to get back to letting the world know what we're for more than what we're against.
Yeah. Are we reactive or are we proactive in how we approach the culture? Are we leading the culture in the right way, or are we trying to draw the culture back to what we want them to be? Anything else? Last call. Feel free to hit me, or there's a lot of people here who study some of this stuff as well. Hit us up if you got other questions. What?
So feel free to hit me. All right.
Hit me up
Hit me in the
with
back, sorry.
questions.
Hit Jason in his bad hand.
All right.
Sorry.
All right. So yeah, we're gonna move to our prayer real quick, and then we're gonna watch Mandalorian, right?